And hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ed Kilgore Show, brought to you by my good friends and my very capable friends at Westher Automotive Group. So we have a lot of things to talk about. I mean, this old guy's seen a lot of stuff. We've got some old stories from Ed's vault. We'll have some opinions from what's going on right now. So of the four Super Bowls I covered back in the early 90s, all were very different, but the most perplexing, the most fun, the most unfun was easily the third one, Pasadena, California for Super Bowl 27 against the upstart Dallas Cowboys, who weren't supposed to be there. They matured little bit earlier, and they upset the 49ers, who everybody thought the Bills would wind up playing in that game. So the Cowboys and a very, very young Troy Aikman, who would say later that he was so nervous he was hyperventilating before the game. So everything started awesome for the Bills. Kelly was really on target. Andre Reed made a couple of great catches and big gains. Steve Tasker partially blocked a punt, and the Bills turned it into a touchdown. So they took an early 7-0 lead, which usually in Super Bowls is a pretty big deal. So the Bills are moving the ball, and the defense is doing a pretty good job. This is early, but Kelly got hurt, and everything changed. Frank Reich, who had been so good in that comeback game, and in a lot of games when he would come in with some preparation time, he was awfully, awfully good. But with no preparation, coming in cold, the Cowboys had a really, really good front four. They put a lot of pressure on him. Frank was terrible. He threw 7 interceptions, and the game turned into a rout, 52-17. So, and it was just the Bills, the locker room was terrible. They were embarrassed, humiliated. This was their third in a row. Little did they know they still had one to go the next year. So after all that was said and done, my wife Debbie and I had planned to meet up again after the game at the Bills Hotel. Debbie was pretty good friends with Linda Reich, Frank's wife, so the plan was they would probably be in the post-game party together, and then we had another couple with us, and we would all meet there and either have a drink there or just go back to the hotel. Nobody was in much of a mood to party, as you might imagine. So I go to the hotel, and I look around, and in the lobby and everywhere else, there's no Debbie. So I see where the Bills are having a party, and it's a closed-off area, and there are a couple of huge security guys there guarding the palace. And so I approached them, and I said, hey, I think my wife is in here. I don't have a pass or anything to get in, but could I just stick my head in here, see if she's here? I'm going to grab her, and we're going to go. And they were kind of not real nice about it, thinking, you don't have a pass? No, you can't go in. And so I'm a little bit perplexed, but I figure, well, it's not the end of the world. We'll figure this out. All of a sudden, somebody is yelling at me. And I mean, they are yelling at me. You don't have a pass. You don't have a ticket. Leave. Get out of here. I turn around, and here's this guy wearing a suit. Looked kind of official, but I said, who are you? And he wouldn't tell me. And I asked him 2 or 3 times, who are you to be yelling at me here? I don't even know who you are. And he wouldn't tell me. Well, it turns out, I found out much later, it was Chris Polian. It was Bill Polian's son, who right now, is the pro personnel director for the Washington football team. And, he was, I'm sure their whole family was in a bad mood, but for more reasons than I knew. So I start to leave, and I'm going through the bar area, which was before the door of the hotel, and I bump into Rick Azar, and we were always good friends on the road with Bills games, and so we're having a beer. About that time, I see out of the corner of my eye somebody is coming straight at me, and it's Bill Polian, and he grabs me by the shirt, and he says, you're not going to attack my family. Now remember, at this point, I had no idea what he meant. I didn't put it together that the person that I was in a little bit of an altercation with there might be his son. So Bill grabs me, and Azar grabs me, and the security, it was a big, ugly, embarrassing scene. So finally we get it sorted out. Bill leaves. I tried to talk to him. Bill, can you just explain to me what's going on here? So he leaves. And the security guys are pretty cool. They decided that I wasn't like a threat to anybody's health, so they said, "Look, you can't stay in the bar, but if you want to go outside and wait for your wife or whatever, you can sit on the steps out there, and we won't bother you." So, fine. So I go sit down, and I'm deciding I'm just going to get a cab, go back to the hotel, and I'm sure they'll all show up at some point. So as I'm sitting there, couple people came by and, "Hey Ed, what are you doing out here?" And I didn't really explain anything until John Butler comes out. Now John, of course, was Bill's personnel director at the time. Later became the general manager of the San Diego Chargers, and one of the most super people I've ever dealt with in the Bills organization or in any of my sportscasting career. John Butler, a wonderful, wonderful man. He sits down next to me. "Eddie, what's going on?" So I explained to him that I had a little run-in with Bill. All of a sudden he just says, "Ed, you know what?" He said, "I've had it. I can't work with the Bills anymore. Bill is just too volatile. I've got to move on." Well, this was a shocker to me because I had no idea. I thought everything, I mean, they're a Super Bowl team. How bad can it be? So he explains this to me. Now, what I didn't know at the time, nor did John Butler know at the time, it turns out, Bill had already been fired by Ralph Wilson. Wilson just let him play out the year. He actually fired him at the start of the year. He didn't like the way he was interacting with his daughters in the front office. There were a bunch of things. And Mr. Wilson could be a little moody at times. He had the same run-ins with Chuck Knox many years earlier. And so he fired some good people as a result of this, but that was Ralph. So after everything is said and done, finally I reconnect with my wife and the other couple. They just gone back to they didn't want to have anything to do with this post-game party. So we go back to the hotel. We fly back to Buffalo the next day. A couple days later, there's a big Bills press conference. And guess what? They introduce a new general manager. It's John Butler. John Butler, who just 2 or 3 days earlier had told me he was quitting, moving, leaving. And so after it was over, the press conference, I went up to John, who had a kind of a sheepish look, like, "Ed, this is just between you and me." So right now is the first time this story has ever been told. Luckily, I don't think Bill Polian minds because it took a while, but finally we caught up at one of the Jim Kelly Stargaze events in New York at the ESPN club there, and had a couple beers and some good laughs about it. And again, you can't be any more praiseworthy of anybody than I was of Bill Polian. I'm his biggest fan. But little did I know that things that night were a little crooked. And I still never run into Chris Polian. But Chris, I hope you're doing okay, and I hope we're good to go. But anyway, that was just one of the Super Bowl stories I wanted to pass along.